1,000 years before Jesus was born, a poet sat down and wrote a description of a dying man. He described hands and feet being pierced. He described bones being pulled out of joint. He described a man so dehydrated his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. He described a crowd standing around watching. He described soldiers dividing the dying man's clothing between them and casting lots for his garment. He wrote it as a song. His name was David. The song is Psalm 22. And when he wrote it, crucifixion had not yet been invented as a method of execution. It would not exist for another 500 years. This is the story of the most precisely documented set of predictions in human history, made centuries before the events, confirmed by the events themselves. Every single one. Before we go through the prophecies, we need to understand what crucifixion actually was. It was not a Jewish method of execution. Jewish law prescribed stoning. Crucifixion was Roman. It was invented by the Persians, perfected by the Romans, and was so brutal that Roman law prohibited its use on Roman citizens regardless of the crime. When the Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah were written, Psalms, Isaiah, Zechariah, crucifixion did not exist in Israel. The writers had no framework for what they were describing. They described hands and feet pierced. They described public humiliation. They described a specific kind of death that would not enter their world for centuries. And yet when Jesus of Nazareth was executed by Rome, every detail matched. Not approximately, exactly. 13 specific predictions. 13 documented fulfillments. This is what that looks like. Psalm 41 verse 9, written by David approximately 1000 BC. Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me. Jesus quoted this verse directly at the Last Supper, applying it to himself, hours before the arrest. Judas Iscariot had been with Jesus for 3 years. He sat at the same table. He shared the same bread. He was trusted with the group's money. He was one of the 12 closest people to Jesus in the world. And he walked into the olive grove at Gethsemane that night, leading an armed crowd, and identified Jesus to the soldiers with a kiss. A close friend, someone trusted, someone who shared bread. Every word of the prophecy fulfilled by the person least expected to fulfill it, the one who had been closest. Zechariah chapter 11 verse 12, written approximately 520 BC. I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver, 500 years before the arrest. The exact price named, 30 pieces of silver, not 20, not 50, 30. When the chief priests negotiated with Judas for the betrayal of Jesus, the price agreed was 30 pieces of silver. The Gospel of Matthew records it specifically, the same number written in Zechariah 5 centuries earlier. But the prophecy continues. Zechariah chapter 11 verse 13. Throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. When Judas returned the coins to the temple, the priests could not keep blood money. They used it to buy a potter's field, written 500 years before it happened. Every detail confirmed. Isaiah chapter 53 verse 7, written approximately 700 BC. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. At the trial before Caiaphas, the high priest demanded Jesus answer the charges being brought by the contradicting witnesses. Jesus said nothing. The text records that Caiaphas was amazed at his silence. Before Pilate questioned him directly. Jesus answered some questions, but fell silent on the accusations themselves. Pilate marveled. The governor of Rome, who had conducted countless interrogations of condemned men, marveled at this man's silence. Isaiah wrote it 700 years before it happened. a lamb before its shearers, silent. The historical record confirms it exactly. Isaiah chapter 50 verse 6, written approximately 700 BC. I offer my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. After the verdict in the house of Caiaphas, before the Roman trial even began, the temple guard struck Jesus repeatedly. They blindfolded him and hit him, asking him to prophesy who struck him. The Gospel of Mark records that some began to spit at him. Before Pilate, the Roman soldiers flogged him. They wove a crown of thorns and pressed it onto his head. They dressed him mockingly in purple. They struck him in the face. They spat on him. Isaiah described the beating, the spitting, the mockery 700 years before the soldiers who carried it out were born. Psalm 22 verse 16, written approximately 1000 BC. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. This is the prophecy that stops scholars cold. When David wrote Psalm 22, approximately 1000 BC, crucifixion did not exist. The standard Jewish method of execution was stoning. The Persians would not develop crucifixion for several more centuries. The Romans would not perfect it for centuries after that. David described a piercing of hands and feet with no framework in his culture for what he was describing. He was writing a lament. He was describing suffering in the most extreme terms he had available. He had no category for crucifixion. And yet, 1,000 years later, the Roman soldiers drove iron spikes through the hands and feet of Jesus of Nazareth outside the walls of Jerusalem. 1,000 years, word for word. Psalm 34 verse 20, written approximately 1000 BC. He protects all his bones. Not one of them will be broken. Exodus chapter 12, the Passover lamb. The law stated specifically, do not break any of the bones. Standard Roman crucifixion procedure included breaking the legs of the crucified to accelerate death, removing their ability to push up and breathe, causing rapid asphyxiation. It was done routinely, efficiently, as a matter of execution procedure. When the soldiers came to the 3 crosses on Golgotha to break the legs before Sabbath, they broke the legs of both men crucified beside Jesus. They came to Jesus and found he was already dead. They did not break his legs. The Gospel of John records this specifically, and then records that this happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one bone broken. Written 1,000 years before, confirmed by Roman procedure. Psalm 22 verse 18, written approximately 1000 BC. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. David wrote 2 distinct actions in one verse, dividing clothes and casting lots for a specific garment. This detail is so precise that the Gospel of John pauses to explain exactly how it was fulfilled. The soldiers took Jesus' outer garments and divided them into 4 shares, 1 for each soldier. But his undergarment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. They said to each other, let's not tear it. Let's decide by lot who gets it. For soldiers, dividing the outer garments, then casting lots for the seamless inner one. 2 separate actions, both described in one verse of Psalm 22, written 1,000 years before the soldiers were born, fulfilled exactly as written, down to the detail of the seamless garment. Psalm 22 verses 7 and 8, written approximately 1000 BC. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Read Matthew 27 verses 39 to 43. The people passing Golgotha shook their heads and hurled insults. The chief priests, teachers of the law, and elders mocked him publicly. And they said, "He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him." For he said, "I am the Son of God." The Gospel of Matthew records the mockery in language so close to Psalm 22 that it cannot be coincidence of phrasing. The specific words of mockery, the head shaking, the taunt about trusting God, written 1,000 years before the crowd that spoke them arrived at the hill outside Jerusalem. Psalm 69, verse 21, written approximately 1000 BC. They put gall on my food and gave me vinegar for my thirst. Two substances named. Gall, a bitter substance. Vinegar, sour wine. Matthew records that when Jesus arrived at Golgotha, soldiers offered him wine mixed with gall. He tasted it but refused a drink. Later, from the cross, Jesus said the words recorded in John's Gospel, "I am thirsty." A jar of wine vinegar was there. Someone soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. Two separate events, both recorded, both matching the two substances in Psalm 69. 1,000 years before the jars of vinegar were sitting at the foot of the cross, David named them. Amos chapter 8, verse 9, written approximately 760 BC. "In that day, declares the sovereign Lord, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight." All three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, record the same event at the crucifixion. From the 6th hour to the 9th hour, noon to 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. 3 hours of darkness in the middle of the day. The Roman historian Thallus, writing around 52 AD, referenced this darkness in a historical account and attempted to explain it as a solar eclipse. The historian Julius Africanus later pointed out that a solar eclipse during Passover was astronomically impossible. Passover occurs at full moon, when eclipses cannot happen. The darkness was real enough for a Roman historian to record it, and Amos named it 760 years before it happened. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 9, written approximately 700 BC. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. This prophecy contains a tension. Assigned a grave with the wicked, meaning his death was as a criminal alongside criminals, but with the rich in his death, meaning his actual burial would be with someone wealthy. Crucified criminals were typically thrown into common graves. Their bodies were not given to their families for burial. They were disposed of. Joseph of Arimathea was a rich man, a member of the Sanhedrin. He went to Pilate privately and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate granted it. Joseph laid Jesus in his own new tomb, cut from rock, never previously used. A wealthy man's tomb. Isaiah named the contradiction 700 years before it resolved itself, exactly as he described. In 1958, mathematician Peter Stoner applied the science of probability to biblical prophecy. He took just 8 of the messianic prophecies, not all of them, just 8, and calculated the probability of one person fulfilling all 8 by chance. His answer, 1 in 10 to the power